The House is resumed. Kia ora tātou, no reira te whare, inga iwi, inga rio, inga hawe wha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening, honourable members. Prior to the dinner break, the Honourable Member Charles Savelle was addressing the Corrections Amendment Bill first reading. The Honourable Member has 4 minutes remaining to speak if he so wishes. I invite the Honourable Member to take the call. I call the Honourable Member Charles Savelle.
When I was speaking before the dinner break, I was making the point that under the bill there are increased powers in respect of the use of strip searches of prison cells, opening inmates' mail and submitting to drug and alcohol tests. And I was making the point that Labour members will want to be assured at the Select Committee, should the matter get to that phase, that there are sufficient safeguards in regards to those powers, because as we know, sometimes there are necessary powers conferred, but there always has to be protection when they are in existence. And it is particularly important to make this point because the regulatory impact statement notes that mandatory strip searches are likely to result only in a small increase. The Ministry of Māori Development objected to the proposal's inclusion because it felt there wasn't a compelling case for the change. And indeed, the Minister conceded in her speech that there was unlikely to be much of a call on this power. She noted that there'd actually been a decrease in drug and alcohol use in prisons. So it is going to be incumbent on the government to justify those provisions. Sir, I said earlier in my speech that this bill contained a mix of some reasonable provisions, some questionable provisions, and one or two provisions that we had major problems with. And the one or two provisions that I want to deal with in conclusion are those provisions. Labor doesn't believe that core state responsibility is currently discharged only by the Chief Executive of the Department and his staff should be delegated to contractors and their staff operating private prisons. And this is especially the case when it comes to core state functions such as deciding to change the security classification of an inmate or the temporary removal or release of inmates from prisons. That power, the power to decide on whether or not a person is minimum, maximum or otherwise security, and whether or not they should be able to get out of jail for a period of time, is a power that is fundamentally appropriate to be exercised by the state, by an employee of the state, the Chief Executive of the Department of Corrections, subject to all the accountabilities that we know of, accountable to the Minister, who is accountable to this House, accountable to the State Services Commissioner when something goes wrong, instead of to the as yet untested accountabilities that apply when the private sector is conducting powers and functions under this Act. This is the power that really concerns me, Mr Speaker, extending the ability of a state sector employee to grant delegations outside the state sector is virtually unprecedented in our law. This is the first time that I can think of where there is a legal context where it is proposed to do that. And where it's being done without the protections that I described, without the Official Information Act, without the oversight of the watchdogs that apply to the Department of Corrections, then we should be very concerned indeed. Labor believes and has always believed that the running of our prisons, the responsibility for that lies with the state because corrections is one of the core functions of government. The government has a moral and a fiscal responsibility to taxpayers to rehabilitate prisoners because of the safety of the community and what depends on it. And it is inappropriate fundamentally to delegate this responsibility to an entity that is driven by profit and which therefore benefits from an increase in the prison population. For goodness sake, if we've learnt nothing from the Californian experience, and it would appear that we haven't learnt much given that we passed a 3 strikes law in the last Parliament, we should have learnt at least that. Sir, the proposal to delegate powers that should remain with the state, especially without safeguards around the delegations, are the chief reason why the Labour Party will be opposing this amendment.
I call the Honourable Member Jackie Dean.